This is an absurd and crazy story about releasing the worst sex offenders in Washington state history, taking them from a secure facility on the isolated McNeil Island in the middle of Puget Sound, and then dropping them into communities near you. No government supervision, just outsourced to for-profit, marginally supervised companies formed by government insiders, raking in the grant cash, no accountability, just a state-sponsored effort to dump violent, vicious sex offenders into neighborhoods in unsecured, unfenced, and inadequately supervised facilities. And these sex offenders will be monitored by $18 an hour, $1 an hour employees, basically, with about 3 days of training. Zero concern by any state government officials for the future victims, not to mention the past victims. In fact, these state agencies are trying to keep it secret from local government officials, and most of the information has been and continues to be concealed from the public. The traditional media is ignoring this story as well. This is a story that impacts more than just Washington state. When these sex offenders escape, and some, probably most, certainly will, many will travel to other communities near you, anywhere in the country, in fact. Frankly, these stupid criminal policy ideas caused by this nearly insane public program is going to hurt you. It's possible that somebody watching this video will eventually know somebody who's been victimized directly as a result of this public policy. And based on their past behavior and their own stated preferences, these predators will be targeting vulnerable women and children. So how exactly did we get here? Well, Washington State Governor Inslee has signed off on this program, and as state executive, he supervises this policy implementation. Washington's Attorney General Bob Ferguson supports it as well, and presumably he's going to be the guy defending it if anyone legally challenges it at some point in time. And he's certainly going to be defending the state when they're sued by the future victims of these predators. The Democratic majority in our state legislature passed the laws that have created the policy, and the bureaucrats who manage DSHS are implementing this insane policy in the most incompetent, guaranteed to produce more victims manner. The newest proposed experimental facility to house these convicted predators is planned to be located near Tenino, Washington, about 13 minutes from my house. And these convicted sex offenders have all officially served their original criminal sentence for crimes of raping and attacking women and children, molesting them in one way or another. I can say woman because I'm not woke and I actually know what a woman is. And I'm not sure if anyone in state government's allowed to do so any longer. But if you're watching this video and you don't know what a woman is, I'd encourage you to do a bit more research. Now, the Department of Corrections is really no longer in charge of supervising these sex offenders, but they have been civilly committed because they are level 3 sex offenders, the worst of the worst, almost certain to reoffend given the opportunity. The state itself actually has diagnosed them as likely or certain to reoffend, again, if they have that opportunity. And it appears now to be Washington state policy to make sure that they have ample opportunity to reoffend and victimize even more women and kids. Now, until recently, these guys, and they're pretty much all men, were housed in the remote McNeil Island in Puget Sound, which is approximately, they had about 200 or so of them been housed there for many years. This was a very secure facility, very difficult to escape or for anyone to visit. It was a perfect place for convicted predators like this. There were not many opportunities to rape, molest, or assault women and children on a remote island like McNeil Island. Now, technically, since they're no longer supervised by the Department of Corrections, they are instead supervised by the Department of Health and Human Services, which is DSHS. However, DSHS just wants to unload them on the community, and apparently, Governor Inslee and other special interests are planning to use McNeil Island for something else. I'm not sure exactly what. Rumor has it that they plan to do some enviro projects out there, but we haven't seen the plan, the cash kickbacks, or the excuse yet in any official way. And yes, if you've watched some of my previous videos, you'll know that I've discussed using this island as a drug rehab and detox facility, particularly for the large homeless drug addicts in the state. But that idea does not appear to be on Governor Inslee's mind. State policy is currently to just keep all these druggies on the street in tents or hotels near you, and to keep giving them free needles, of course. So because of a desire to equitably distribute these violent level 3 sex offenders all around the state, this means that nearly every county gets their fair share of these sex offender predator criminals. Apparently, Thurston County, where I live, gets about 11 of them or so, and it's still a little murky on exactly how the bureaucrats created this number, but that's the number that they currently propose. So a year ago, a group of businesses investing in a company called Supreme Living, run by a former DSHS employee and DCYF employee named Angela Rinaldo, who's a proud Evergreen State College grad, of course, decided that they could make money buying properties and then filling them with sex offenders. She makes bank. DSHS gets to dump these scumbags into kind of a private for-profit company, not subject to the Public Records Act and at an arm's length from the agency, so that when these level 3 sex offenders start piling up new victims, everyone can point the finger at each other and nobody gets blamed. It's the perfect solution for the political insiders. Of course, it isn't too good for the women and children who will be victimized, but none of these politicians, bureaucrats, or certainly the grant-grifting business people really seem to care about that. Not Governor Inslee, not State AG Bob Ferguson, certainly not DSHS, and sure as heck not Supreme Living CEO and big cash grant recipient Angela Rinaldo, who basically just sees dollar signs in the pain she plans to inflict on local communities. Nope, their current plan, when kids and women get raped, murdered, and harmed, will be to throw their hands up in the air and say, hey, that wasn't supposed to happen, and then blame each other. This is government operating at its logical best. The insiders are playing their part, and the rest of us get to get victimized. Now, let's dig into the proposed Tenino facility because it just seems particularly slimy, and even those of us familiar with the corruption and incompetence of government programs, this one's actually kind of a bit out there. Now, first of all, Angela Rinaldo is a kind of a weird duck, which might make her perfect for this Governor Inslee DSHS pass the buck scheme. After she graduated from Evergreen State College near Olympia, she did what most Evergreen grads do. She went to work in government. The private sector, even back then, is mostly they didn't prefer to hire Evergreen grads. So in Angela's case, she's been working in government for over 40 years, apparently mostly at DSHS, and then Department of Children and Youth and Families, which is DCYF. It stands, it's a relatively new state agency. Now, I've looked up some of her job descriptions and salaries, which are public information, and she claims she was a victim advocate, but about 8 years ago, she became a sex offender advocate because apparently there's more money in that career path. Now, a little aside here, I've been concerned for over a decade now at kind of the slipshod and lackadaisical hiring practices of DSHS. This came to my attention about 10 years ago when I found out a disbarred attorney from Colorado, disbarred for stealing money and committing fraud with dozens of his former clients, came to Olympia and donated cash to local Democrats and then was hired as a level 3 adjudicator for DSHS. And in this job capacity, this guy represented the most vulnerable citizens in the state. And when I confronted the agency about this, they just shrugged their shoulders and they admitted that their background checks, when and if they even did any, wouldn't catch this, and being a fraudster wasn't enough of a reason apparently to not hire somebody for that position. It was terrifying. And while I know a lot of good people who work for that agency, very few are in upper management. And when I run into someone like this Angela Rinaldo person who claims to be a victim's advocate but appears enthusiastic to make bank, dumping predators into places where they can victimize more women and kids in the future, it's a reminder to me that nobody appears to be adults and nobody's watching these agencies, just nobody. Now, according to the Secretary of State's corporation's website, Angela's been forming a variety of business ventures and limited liability corporations in Washington state. She frequently posts fundraising asks on her Facebook page, asking for a $20,000 investment at a 6% return for a food truck here, or bragging about her $245,000 Mexican condo escape house here. Presumably, this will come in handy when everything goes wrong with her violent sex offender release program in Tenino and elsewhere in Washington state. She can enjoy the ocean views and sandy beaches while the women and children get raped and sexually abused back in Washington. I will note, just for the movie buffs out there, that if you ever watch Shawshank Redemption, this was the beach, the same beach, Zihuatanejo, where the movie characters supposedly met up at the end of the show after the prison break. Now, originally, after Angela Rinaldo and her fellow investors bought this rural home for over $1 million on partly fenced acreage in rural Thurston County last year, the plan appeared to be to house all the McNeil released sex offenders, at least for Thurston County, at this one location. It was up to 12. However, some quick-witted neighbors managed to catch wind of the scheme, and they informed Thurston County about this sneaky and secret operation. According to the Thurston County Commissioners, nobody at DSHS or Supreme Living had informed them at all of their plans to dump sex offenders in the community. So this caused some delay, as most of the original plans for large numbers of sex offenders were illegal under Thurston County zoning rules. So unfortunately for Angela, the profit margin had been reduced by a bit because they could only house 5 violent sex offenders at this location without a special use permit. Now, additionally, Thurston County told her that she had to do kind of a public meeting about the project, which Angela was very testy, bitter, and angry about. But she tried quietly to bury the notice, this kind of informal notice, in the smallest Facebook group in South Thurston County, the one for Bakota, and then host a public meet and greet in Tenino a few weeks ago. You can see it here. Fortunately for us, this meeting was partially recorded by a few people who attended, and I've actually linked the original videos down below. It's broken into a couple different videos. And Angela proceeded to put on a master class performance of aversion and failing to answer questions, lying, and pretty much convinced everybody in the community that she had no plan at all to prevent new victims of the sex offender predators she planned to unleash on the community. Repeatedly, she was caught in lies, and she just didn't care. This meeting was actually attended by angry local elected officials, and nobody watching this performance came away from the meeting with any sense that this scheme was a good idea, except apparently Angela Rinaldo herself. Now, if you watch these videos, you can also see a shocking and just heartless lack of concern on the part of Angela for the future victims of her profit-making project. This is mostly shocking because, theoretically, she's been a victim advocate in the past, so she says, and I guess the victims matter no longer when so much grant cash is falling from state coffers. Now she's just become an advocate for violent predators. Now, the house itself doesn't appear to conform to most of the requirements as outlined in this 2020 proposal by the state for these types of facilities, but what the heck? Nobody apparently planned to follow them anyway. Plus, it doesn't seem like anyone at the state is going to care regardless. So the chosen location is next to families with little children, next to a daycare facility that's in the process of being licensed. Conveniently, it is overlooking the backyard of one family, and then with a perfect view of a private water ski lake for kids on the other side of the property. So the sex offender guests will be given full internet access at the house, which will be convenient for them to both surf porn sites and possibly research their neighbors. And they can also coordinate maybe an easy escape on I-5 that's just a 10-minute hike away. And that's how they're going to end up in your neighborhood, regardless of what state you live in. Or perhaps the predators will just keep it local with a short hike to the nearby Miller-Sylvania State Park campgrounds during the summer months while families are enjoying the great outdoors, unaware of the creeping menace nearby. Who knows? There are lots of fascinating, very ugly scenarios that all end badly, and none of them are imagined by the owner, Angela Rinaldo. Just watch her speak about it at her kind of faux public meet and greet forum. Zero concerns there, as long as the cash keeps flowing her way. Now, maybe she doesn't care, and the cash is so good, really, really good, so she can just ignore the new victims she will create with her profit-making venture, and what does she care anyway? She'll be on the beach in Mexico at her condo, paid for by releasing sex offenders on the rest of our families. The $18 per hour employees with 3 days of training will be supremely unprepared to deal with the escapes or attacks, but they can call the Department of Corrections, provided it's before 5 p.m. and not on a weekend if an escape actually occurs. What could go wrong here? Would you be letting your kids out to play in the campground at Miller-Sylvania knowing that these guys are not far away? And why do we need to do this throughout the state when we know what will eventually happen? Why the heck are they moving these criminals from the current secure location on McNeil Island? Why couldn't they just find another island or at least a large, secured, supervised facility? A lot of questions still need to be answered. But from what I've been told by legislators and other insiders, the plans for McNeil Island post-sex offenders being released into our neighborhoods is possibly a wildlife sanctuary or some part of Inslee's green agenda, rather than find another remote facility that can be manned by professionals with all the proper security protocols in place. DSHS has decided to just release these predators in our community. Now, keep in mind, the same people like Attorney General Bob Ferguson, the Democrat Party, caucus in the legislature, and, of course, Governor Inslee himself, they're doing their best to restrict your ability to protect yourself and your family by restricting your Second Amendment rights and access to firearms to defend yourself. Of course, these are the exact same people who are releasing these violent criminals into your community. The same people. And of course, every one of them, including Angela Rinaldo, hate your ability to own firearms. Here's a Facebook post of hers before she took down her entire account recently. Now, the absurd part of this story is that if someone is forced to defend themselves from one of these criminal, violent sex offenders and they shoot the criminal, it's possible that the same Democrats will attack the woman, and it's usually a woman, who is forced to shoot the criminal in self-defense or in defense of her children. I live nearby, about 13 minutes away, and I know most of the people in my community are armed and prepared to defend themselves if necessary. And I expect this sex offender release project will help more people arm up even more. However, nobody wants it to come to this, and we can completely avoid this type of outcome as well. Now, this specific facility can be stopped. The Thurston County commissioners have more power than they realize in this case, and I recognize that Democrat Commissioner Ty Mentzer was unfortunately reelected, and he has publicly stated that these violent sex offenders need to live somewhere. So maybe from his perspective, it appears he doesn't mind them living next door to people who didn't vote for him. However, the other two county commissioners, Independent Gary Edwards and Democrat Carolina Mejia, are strongly opposed to this scheme. And they do have the power as the Board of Health to intervene. But they will get no legal help from Thurston County's prosecutor, John Thunheim, who seems allergic to prosecuting criminals and who has assigned one of the worst and least competent attorneys in Thurston County, Linda Petrich, as legal counsel to the commission. Now, this is more than just a Thurston County problem. Everyone in our state is at risk, particularly if you have children or if you're a woman. However, it isn't just about the people that these criminals will visit in their new neighborhoods. I mean, these predatory criminals have been in prison for many years, and this is their first real chance to completely escape and go do what they've been wanting to do for a long while now. It's very likely that when they escape, they won't stop at the state boundary. Nope, some of them are heading to Idaho, Montana, Florida, wherever they can hitch a ride, steal a car, or catch a bus. It's not like anybody in our government's prepared to stop them or even has a plan on what to do when they run. Now, we're in the process of digging into every single person involved in this insanity. The politicians, the bureaucrats, the profiteers like Angela Rinaldo. In her case, someone really needs to dig a lot deeper into her background because something's really wrong here. A so-called victims advocate who cares not a bit about creating more victims has probably been doing a very poor job at advocating for victims in the past. The bureaucrats at DSHS who are keeping this project a secret from the people and then concealing these secret projects from local elected officials and the public, they need to be held accountable as well. And this goes all the way to the top of DSHS, and every senior bureaucrat should be publicly identified and they should answer for their actions. I mean, what are we paying for at this agency? I know they squander our tax dollars every day on just stupid things, but just how insane is upper management here? Does anyone at a senior level at this agency care about the people that they're actively harming? Or do they just view the harm that they inflict on us as part of their job security? And finally, the politicians who so cavalierly just decided that this was good public policy need to be held accountable as well. Governor Inslee's obvious, AG Bob Ferguson, and also the legislators who've been pushing to unleash sex offenders on our children need to be held accountable as well. They don't get a free pass. And while I'm making this video right now, a large group of local Thurston County residents are outside the commissioner meeting off of Pacific Avenue protesting this fiasco, and they're in the meeting itself speaking, and they're begging the Thurston County commissioners to stop the inevitable fiasco that this project will become in our community. And this is important, but it's just the beginning. I will also point out that the local community members who have organized against this scheme are already being shadow banned and silenced by Facebook. And likely, they'll continue to be silenced by the traditional social media companies. And the traditional media seems to want to look the other way, too. So while you still can see this video right now, make sure you share it with others. And if it gets canceled, I'll find other platforms where it can be posted. As insane as government appears to be right now, you just can't escape the abuse that they plan to inflict on you if you ignore them. We're far more likely to stop the stupidity and the willful horror by exposing it and confronting it. We can't hide from this. We can't zone out watching Netflix and just hope it goes away. It won't. This is just one example, an extreme one for sure, but just one. There are hundreds of examples like this, and the only way we stop them is by confronting them and pushing back, probably taking away some of their money too. I mean, remember, the future belongs to those who show up. And for too long now, not enough of us actually have been showing up to stop stuff like this.